The other day I played another 6 hours or so, if not a little over, of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, courtesy of a remote capture event held by Ubisoft. Add on the 3 hours from July and it works out that I've put in roughly 9 hours of playing time into this game pre-launch. And thus this video shall function as my preview of the game, which launches in just under a month's time. I'll go over all that I like and all that I wasn't keen on in a nice, fair way that shows you what kind of game Assassin's Creed Valhalla is. So please do sit back and enjoy as I give you the rundown of what I think. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a massive game. From the East Anglia demo back in July, it felt like there was a lot to see and do. Too much to do in 3 hours, which is a lot considering the area was not gigantic. The demo here takes place a bit further north in an area that houses the settlement, that being an area within Mercia, and I'd like to say I managed to do more or less everything in just over 6 hours, which is a lot of time considering the size of the area compared to the size of the overall game. In this demo, the most standout thing for me was the handling of the side content. In Valhalla, we're not seeing traditional side quest structure. The quest log tracks main quests and the main story relevant stuff, but the side activities are contained within the world and marked as such, tracked primarily by your own interest as opposed to some log telling you to do it, forcing you to, at times, to declutter your menus. This gives the side content a much more authentic feeling. It makes me want to explore and see what I can find. It also means we won't be stuck within the confines of go here, do this, and go here, do that objectives that have no purpose other than to hold your hand through blandness and make you feel like it's achieving something. Some encounters you run into may interest you, others may just not. And if you open one and decide it's not for you, it'll be marked on your map so you can return to it if you wish, but it isn't shoved in your face on the quest log in a fashion that makes you feel as if the game is bullying your OCD to just cave and do some activity that you couldn't care less about. The quest log being clear of this side content doesn't give you the stress of feeling like you've been slapped in the face by a mile-long checklist that just gets bigger and bigger the more you explore. The side content is better for not being a part of some quest log system as well. Some side quests in Assassin's Creed Origins were pretty decent, and dare I say even Odyssey had some standouts, but there was always an inconsistency in this, as for every good Origins quest you had a poor, boring or repetitive one, and for every good Odyssey quest it felt like you had upwards of 20 or 30 fetch quests. In that system the good stuff tends to get lost. I'm not going to pretend that logic applies to all games, it certainly doesn't, as some games master that quest log system beautifully, but I don't think it really worked too great for what Assassin's Creed was trying to do. In Valhalla, having it free of that, you can see the side content as individual activities as opposed to one big block of stress. By the looks of it, not all encounters in this game are going to be incredible or groundbreaking, but doesn't that add an extra layer of depth when it's not confused with the value of a side quest which gets your anticipations up? And they're pretty fun besides. I remember one woman in the sewers of a city asking me to get her viper eggs, so I did. She'd ask for more and more until eventually she had enough, and then she created a stink bomb and stunk out an entire area of the city, which was quite amusing, and I'll be honest, were that a side quest that I thought, hang on a minute, what's going on here? But because it's not in the quest format, there's nothing getting your hopes up about what this could turn into. It's just a harmless encounter in the world in which a prankster decides to stink bomb a city, which I think is pretty funny. On top of this, you have less of an idea of where an encounter is going to go. In the tracked quest form, usually side quests give you a good idea of what's going to happen in them thanks to a quirky title that could be an Easter egg, or it could just be some play on a metaphor or an idiom, and so that gives these world encounters some more agency to do something unpredictable. And like I said, if it doesn't turn out to be for you, this system also makes it easier to walk away from these encounters without having to worry about it sitting on your quest log and bothering you. It'll leave a very subtle marker of where it was on your map if you decide to come back and do it, which allows you to feel more open to these lighter activities because they're not forced into some one objective fetch quest, for example. We've now established that there are no longer side quests existing for the sake of giving the player a checklist as long as eternity that appeals to their inner OCD to force them to play what they'd otherwise avoid. I think it's fair to say that Valhalla is going to be better for it. The side content is also a little more versatile in what it could be when you see the blue icon appear on your compass. You don't know quite what it is that you'll find, whereas an obnoxious box with an exclamation mark in the middle tells you exactly what you're going towards. A quest. A world event could be as simple as telling a child that their father is never coming home and they must get on with their life. Or it could be collecting viper eggs for a crackhead in the sewers, or a full-on fight club or a boss fight. Or it could be some kind of puzzle. And I like puzzles, they're pretty awesome. And the joy is, if any of it is not for you, then you can simply just move on. On top of this, there's no real level gating to speak of. You do have a power rating and it does affect some of the things that you can do and when. For example, there are some fights that you can have in the world in which there are enemies that are by design very powerful. But no world activity Odyssey that I came across was locked behind a level wall. Nothing said that you needed to be this level of power to do this or anything like that. And that applies to the main quests that I got to experience in this demo as well. At no point did I feel like I had to go off and grind. Locations are marked often with little gold markers, much less difficult on the eyes than an obnoxious question mark. Within certain locations you can see little white markers, which are interactions you can have, be it a merchant or some dialogue you can exchange, as well as collectibles such as tattoo designs that you can find throughout the world. Gold markers work out as locations, blue markers work out as world activities, encounters and stories, and white markers function as points of interest besides, such as dialogue you can exchange with certain people, maybe a merchant, maybe a collectible. I guess what I'm trying to say is the open world feels much better organised in this game. I found a lot of enjoyment in the exploration as I got to do. There was plenty to do and nothing felt shoved in my face. At times I had to go out of my way to find some encounters, but I found myself wanting to. This was by far the biggest takeaway from this 6-hour session. The game's not overcrammed with stuff to do, but there's plenty that'll take you a good few hours per area, which in my mind is nice and balanced. And I don't doubt that the rest of the game is like this demo area, but with any luck when the game launches that will be the case. The settlement is another huge aspect of this game that I got to experience in my 6-hour session as well, and boy, there's a lot to get about doing here. Firstly, you can build different structures with resources you gather as you explore the world. It's not stupid numbers like Odyssey, but rather more reasonable numbers like seen for upgrades in, say, Black Flag. When you build a structure, it houses individuals who can then ply a trade and trade with you. My favourite building is the tattoo parlour, where you can go in and change Eivor's hair colour, style and tattoos. With the tattoos you can cover different body parts individually, which allows you some customization agency, and you can just make yourself look really cool. You can also decorate your settlement to make it feel a little bit more homely. And another ace thing you can do is customize your longship, turning it into a terrifying seafaring vessel fit for a Viking. I don't want to go into too much detail about everything you can do at the settlement because there's a great chance that I don't know it all myself, and I also don't want to ruin other players exploring it too much by telling you everything that's there that I know of. But as one last really cool thing that's there appears to be what functions as a bureau for the hidden ones, or the assassins if you're old school like me. It's always good to see some of Assassin's Creed's brand identity in Assassin's Creed. It's a great indicator that Valhalla could get the franchise back on track, but on that front I'm really not holding my breath. As you upgrade your settlement it levels up, and when it levels up it opens up new opportunities to you, or at least that's what the game says when it does. What that means I'm not entirely sure yet, but I'm sure it means something. On the front of minigames, flighting can be quite fun, and I also gave Orlog a good go, and I think, you know what, it's kind of decent. It's just a simple little minigame to pass the time whenever you need it to, and I can't say I fully understood the rules, but it doesn't seem like something that's quite difficult once you get used to it. In my 6-hour session I got to experience a little story arc that is a part of the main quest, and while it was hard to follow considering the demo is completely out of context, it was intriguing enough and felt somewhat plausible within itself, though to judge anything narrative in any capacity I shall hold off and wait until the game launches. Unfortunately I did however notice a few voice lines that felt somewhat stale, and at times disembodied. For the most part, voice acting in what I played has been just fine, but every now and then there will be a character that sounds just a little bit like somebody reading lines from a piece of paper, as opposed to sounding like authentic conversation within a world space. Just the same, the voices in this are far more believable than those presented in Odyssey, so that's at least something, and please bear in mind that I don't know how any of this will translate to the rest of the game, of which I have not experienced. Facial animations for the most part are of course an improvement over Odyssey as well, though they are far from the game's most redeeming feature. Many characters have unique looks, and the faces with more distinguishable detail are better to look at for sure. That doesn't translate too well to all characters that I've seen thus far, as some do look like they still need a bit of work to be easily memorable and identifiable within the game. Visually I get the impression this game has some magnificent sights to behold. It seems as if there's plenty of aesthetic variety, as we know the Four Kingdoms are essentially different biomes, so you've got your winter, spring, summer and autumn regions. Though I can't speak for the different regions, all I can say is this particular region looks really nice. The colour balancing is very kind on the eyes, and there are some absolutely killer views. On that front I think the footage speaks for itself. On the gameplay front I got to give the social stealth a try, which I was super keen to do. A lot of more populated areas are distrust areas, so if you go in there guards will notice you and investigate. I didn't get much time with it as the game doesn't seem to prioritise it, nor is it really that effective in a lot of situations, at least those that I tried, but it's useful to know it's there to avoid being detected in certain areas. You have a HUD that you can manually toggle, or it will automatically pop up in these distrusted areas. Couple the social stealth with traditional stealth and you have yourself a fairly solid stealth system, but again Assassin's Creed Valhalla very clearly wants to prioritise your combat. Maybe the social stealth just requires me to get more used to it, or maybe I'm just not very good at the game. That's always possible, you know. On the parkour front, the gameplay is mostly the same as that of Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey, though I will say it's nothing like the nerfed version that we got in Odyssey, where you wouldn't be able to do anything. A lot of spaces are clearly designed with parkour in mind, meaning you can traverse from A to B using that system if you so wish. It's not all spaces, it's usually interiors to buildings and city areas that have this sort of parkour structure in mind. At least from the demo that I played anyhow, I would like to see how one of the big cities handles the parkour, for example York or London or Winchester. I reckon it'll be very hard to judge it until I properly see it flowing in full. Though collecting collectibles such as tattoo sheets requires you to chase a piece of paper using parkour, and you can see how certain areas have been designed to account for that. Onto the combat, I wouldn't say it's my favourite system ever, but I do think it's rather decent. In fact, in a lot of aspects it's very good. It's a deep combat system with plenty of flesh to it. It's well balanced as enemies no longer feel like damage sponges, and it's deep because you have so much at your disposal: your light attacks, your heavy attacks, your abilities. You've got your stun attacks, you've got your bow, which also has its own abilities that you can use. You can then mix and match your weapons to make for the perfect build, provided you have the right perks. You could dual wield anything from shields, for some reason, to heavy weaponry. And then you'll have all the different enemy archetypes that you'll find in the game that require you to use a new strategy. Not to mention all the skills that you can unlock that will change the landscape of your approach to combat at times. On top of this, the combat is visceral, with decapitated heads and severed limbs flying all over the place. Also, while aiming the bow in combat, you will see that enemies have weak spots, which if you hit, you will do massive amounts of damage, which is incredibly useful, especially in boss fights. Boss fights require you to use strategy as opposed to just having you chip away at an endless health bar. At times you need to figure out how to best tackle their attack patterns, at least in a relatively simplistic sense. If you're not careful, you lose your health pretty quickly. And on top of this, a lot of the combat is stamina based, so if you have no stamina, you cannot dodge or use heavy attacks, meaning you've got to be mindful of your stamina bar lest you wind up in trouble. As for restoring your health in combat, you need to gather rations, or if you find any mushrooms hanging about, you can eat them as well, because what could possibly go wrong? If you have no rations and you're in the middle of a fight and you can't find anything to eat anywhere, then you've just got to work with the health you have. Whether this was intended or not, I can imagine this will put a lot of players in the mindset of preparing themselves before a tricky battle. Now, from what I've played, the combat is brought down a little bit by the fact that you can't tell whether or not the combat wishes to feel light or heavy and weighted. As a result, it's pretty tough to get the measure of it. On top of this, the range of your attacks can be unpredictable. At times it's perfectly fine, other times you could feel like you're right in front of your enemy's swing and still miss, not because you missed direction wise, but because that attack for some reason decided to not have any range whatsoever. I'm probably overthinking that one, but it's just how it feels to play at times. But there's a lot of flesh to this combat system, complete with plenty of positives to take away from it. It's challenging, it's balanced, it encourages players to experiment, there's a variety in what you can do, it has some nice animations in the form of visceral murder, it doesn't let you dodge about like an absolute maniac, and at times requires you to work out an enemy's attack pattern before you can get a hit off. The only real downside is that it feels a tad messy. It's just worth remembering in those times so that the combat doesn't always necessarily wind up in a clusterfuck. There's a lot going on in the combat, far more than even I know now, so I shall leave this point by simply saying that the Assassin's Creed Valhalla combat certainly does get the seal of approval from me. When it comes to the longship, what's not to like? It's quite a simple system. You use it to sail the rivers and waterways of England. You can use it to begin raids, or you can just simply use it for the sake of travel. You can have your crew sing, or you can have somebody tell a story, which you can ask for manually, and there's even a cinematic camera. The longship is an awesome, peaceful means to travel the world, and it's really relaxed and laid back, so it's a nice change of pace from whatever else you might wind up doing in the game. Speaking of everything else, you can also use the longship to initiate raids if you so wish to, and so the longship is incredibly useful. I also gave the fishing system a go, and I must say I'm quite a fan. Once you hook a fish, you use your left stick to control it, and then you mash a button to pull it towards you. It's a nice relaxing gameplay feature, isn't it really? I quite liked it. Hunting, on the other hand, is as simple as running off into the woods and senselessly murdering different animals. Altogether, I had a proper blast playing through this 6-hour session of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and really look forward to playing the full game when it launches in November. It looks as if this game is going to offer a lot for players, and this video is only chipping the surface. I can't tell you whether or not the game is going to be for you, that's for you to decide, and I can't tell you whether or not the game is going to be good, because in the end of the day, I've only played a couple of demos by this point. All I can say is what I played was good. It's also worth remembering that this is not footage of a final build, so everything is still subject to some amount of change. Hopefully this video was helpful in some capacity. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, that would be fantastic. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, take care and goodbye.